You sure I said join me? All right, yes, fine. Now we'll try it again. Right. Hello. You've dropped in on one of our rehearsals for a new series of programs called...
And when Richard finds the right camera, he'll be with you on BBC Two every Thursday, starting this week at 10:15. On BBC One shortly, The Hardest Game. Harry Carpenter reviews the world of boxing since the 1920s. This is BBC Two. 18 months ago, Nick Ross reported for Man Alive on drug abuse in Britain. Now, with new warnings about the urgency of the problem, Man Alive returns to the subject with the first of 2 programmes.
Look, we're not just talking about heroin. That's the belief that existed in the 1960s. It wasn't true then, and it certainly isn't true now. We're talking about the way in which a whole range of substances are being used and misused. We're talking about the use of barbiturates. We're talking about the use of tranquilizers. We're talking about the use of common household substances, about cleaning fluids, about glue. All of those things are involved.
At least 6 times a day, every day, an ambulance squeezes through the London traffic to pick up drug abusers from the underground station at Piccadilly Circus. Attracted by the bright lights, the sense of freedom and adventure, youngsters from all over Britain tumble down these steps towards the underground warmth, and sometimes to a lonely death. Drugs down here are plentiful if you're not fussy, and not many addicts are fussy. Most will take anything that's going. Nowadays, the old notions of hard and soft drugs are almost meaningless. Many common medicines are as dangerous as heroin. Above all, there are barbiturates, and in a culture that's full of slang, they're aptly known as barbs. Barbiturates are now so common, their trade names here are as the names of sweets might be to children. Nembutal, sodium amytal, seconal, and tuinal. This is where they fix, in the privacy of a lavatory, breaking up capsules and tablets and injecting the powder mixed with water from the pan. At best, a fix will give sensations of euphoria or numbness. But pills are not designed to be injected. Many react unpredictably. The dosages are hard to gauge, and the results are sometimes deadly.
Have you got it?
When the lavatory attendant saw us filming, she said, "Thank God you've come. It's about time someone showed what's going on down here."
Sodium what was it, Susan? And what was it, sodium? Sodium amytal.
Susan usually takes the same amount of stuff each time, and they've got her records at the Middlesex Hospital, and they will know as soon as she arrives, according to what's in the syringe.
So it happens so regularly, you get to know individual patients
You know them all by their first name, as do all my colleagues.
That's it.
What's the matter, Susan?
Middlesex.
This is the woman who first noticed the growing, changing problems of drug abuse in Britain. Nursing officer Miss Beryl Rose.
I found that over a matter of 10 years, there was approximately a 7-fold increase. And at first, whereas there were more heroin addicts, latterly there have been far more barbiturate abusers, especially tuinal.
A 7-fold increase in 10 years?
This is quite astonishing. Many of them are brought as many as 3 times in 24 hours. In fact, one patient has been brought 200 times in a total of 6 years until her death.
Piccadilly Circus has long been the home of the hardcore addict, and often unnoticed by the milling crowd, this is where medicines with names like Ritalin and Methadone are bought and sold, or scored, as the addicts put it. In these days of multi-drug abuse, even school children can afford to get the habit. And that's how this girl started, Gina. Now aged 23 and proof, if it were needed, that the comfortable stereotype of junkies is out of date. She's not the bewildered child of someone rich or famous, nor the product of what's politely called a problem family. Her childhood was as happy as most, her background very ordinary in the London suburbs. Gina was a little rebellious in her teens, perhaps, but she was not a dropout who turned to drugs. Drugs were just a part of life that came to her.
When did you first take drugs? Can you remember?
I was 14 when I was with some of my mates. And they brought me up here one day and they scored.
They scored?
Yeah, and I was very curious about it. And they gave me their drugs to hold on to, and well, I slipped a couple out. It was barbs at the time, slipped a couple out. And I took them.
And how often did you take them after that?
Every day for about 2 years.
That was from the age of 14?
Yeah. I want to take a picture of you, okay? You wouldn't get it, darling. Hey? Why didn't you?
And how did it affect your schoolwork or your life at home?
Badly.
Did you realise what effect they were having on you?
Not really, it was all fun then. It was when I was 17 that I realised I did have a habit. And I didn't think possible I could get one. I thought it would never happen to me, I would get addicted. I did.
How long have you been on drugs?
Well, about 11 years. I was registered 7 years in heroin, like, you know. I've come down here to score, man. I mean, what else is left is there for us, you know? What else left? I mean, look at the day now. I went over Aldgate, I got ripped off. I mean, I had a coloured guy cut me. I had 4 stitches in my head in St Thomas's. It's a bit much, isn't it, eh? You know, look. It's a bad time. Do you know what? It's getting like the States here. They're cutting down the maintenance dose at the clinics, and they're creating a black market situation.
I think clinics are the worst things, actually.
Well, clinics were a good thing at one time. You know, we were proud of it.
Wasn't private doctors the best?
Pardon?
Wasn't private doctors
Yeah,
the
bring
best?
back Petro. I want Petro. He was great.
And Swan.
And Swan and all of them. Yes, they were
All of
great.
them.
Yeah.
What sort of drugs are you on, Mickey?
Well, at the moment, I'm using heroin and Ficepta. Anything I can get, man, I put in there. Anything I can get, you know?
Do you use
Right.
barbiturates as well?
I use barbs, yeah. Yeah, I'm full of barbs now, as a matter of fact. Look what happened to me, though, man. A dirty rip-off, eh? All over 4 lousy Ritalin worth £4. Now, I could have been killed, you know?
How easy is it to get drugs down here?
It's quite easy to score if you got the bread, you know?
And how much you have to pay?
Well, black market prices are steep, man. They're really steep.
Forever for an am.
Yeah.
Now, I've paid £15 for 1 pill of heroin, which
That's
wasn't
right. On a Sunday.
near enough as
And what about barbiturates?
sufficient for me.
£4 a pound average. £4 a pound average.
No, £2 down
Well,
here.
yeah.
And how many do you need for one dose?
Well, you need, see, a barbiturate's a downer. It's just to keep you calm, man. It's like a drink, you know? Keeps you calm, you know what I mean?
Can everybody stand back, please? There's nothing to look at, please.
The same night, and another 2 admissions. This girl has overdosed on Ficeptone, sometimes known as Phi. She risks coma, inhaling vomit, or death through simply stopping breathing. There are 3 overdosed addicts at any one time in the Middlesex Hospital on an average night.
I like the Christmas decorations. Maureen. Hello.
Leave the dressing alone until we're You need some more tuna?
While they suck out vomit, the staff wear plastic gloves to guard against infectious hepatitis, which is common among addicts.
She's got a few abscesses on her arm here, which are typical of addicts. I mean, they've quite some time they've been packed, but they drag on for ages and ages.
All the staff can do is dress the wounds and try to keep the patients from choking.
They normally stay in here until they wake up a bit more, and then they go home.
Or come back again.
Or come back again.
With nowhere else to put them, they're left on mattresses on the floor, where staff like Dr. David Williams can keep an eye on them.
Unfortunately, this is a very frequent occurrence in this department and in many other departments in central London. And in addition to that, they are a very demanding sort of patient, especially during the recovery phase, when they can be very difficult, they can be verbally aggressive, verbally abusive, even physically aggressive sometimes.
Susan's been a regular of ours for about 2 years now. She has long lapses where she doesn't come in at all, but she has been a regular. In between the lapses where she doesn't come into us, she quite frequently holds down quite a good job, in fact, because she often talks about doing sort of temporary work as a secretary. So,
She's got quite a history of drug abuse, hasn't she?
well, yes, her whole family have been sort of involved with drugs. She's got a brother and possibly 2 sisters. One of the sisters we know as well here, who is a regular, and the brother Gus is dead now.
How long is Susan likely to survive if she goes on taking drugs?
Well, you can't tell. You can't tell with these people at all.
You know the things that you happen in your movie.
No, I'm not moving. I may not believe what?
I've got to meet another chick.
Maureen's also quite regular, but I think only she's been more regular in the last 6 months and before in the last sort of 2 years. She's a known abuser of everything under the sun. She comes in and she says she's taken everything from LSD to heroin to Tuinul to tablets of anything, any sort. She's separated. She has been married. She's got a little girl.
She looks after the girl herself?
Well, no, she keeps it with friends, I think. She never actually goes into it, but I know she has a little girl.
She looks in a really bad way when she was brought in.
Yes. She is quite often like that. She's quite bad, actually.
That's right. You walk through here now.
And yet, as soon as the addict can walk, they leave, perhaps to overdose again.
We're grateful for what she's done. Okay.
What's this?
In the end, it's not just the addicts and hospital staff who are trapped in the cycle, but families. This is Gina's mother, and she has to cope with what happens when Gina comes home.
She's literally like a deranged animal. She can't eat her food properly. It doesn't go in her mouth. It goes all over her clothes, all over the floor. She can become very violent. She has at times attacked me with knives. She's come at me with... She's smashed a beaker and come at me with that.
It's not really me, because I'm not a violent person at all. I'm very placid. But when one takes barbs, it really does alter the personality. And I know I can become real bitch at times.
Do you feel you're guilty, you're responsible in some way, that you're to blame for it? I'm not saying do you think that, but do you feel that?
Well, of course it must. Any parent must feel a sense of dreadful responsibility and guilt. It's a problem which many people might say, well, it couldn't happen to me, but it can.
I would very, very much love to come off of drugs for good. I really do want to come off. I'm really sick of the sight of drugs.
Why don't you make this your firm resolve then? You said that you want this program to help other youngsters. Don't you think it would be a boost to their morale to see somebody who's been through all this, as you have, and to publicly make a statement that you will come off?
I'm going to really try to come off, and I want to come off. Maybe my determination will help me to stay off.
Do you believe her?
I always believe her. It's the bitter disappointment each time.
What's happened to Gina has happened to youngsters in towns and cities throughout Britain. Classic drugs like heroin have to be smuggled, but medicines are everywhere. And since most medicines are legal, they're hard to keep track of. In London, the Home Office tries to monitor drug addiction, but their procedures have hardly changed in a decade. Only the old hard drugs like heroin are notifiable, and so official statistics have failed to reveal the true extent of the problem of multi-drug abuse. Last year, a survey of our own, conducted with the help of police throughout Britain, found that drug squads believe legal barbiturates now pose a greater threat than heroin, and that as many as 130,000 people are now abusing dangerous drugs. That's 30 times the official number of addicts. Within the corridors of the Home Office, 1 or 2 officials have been warning about multi-drug abuse for years, but little has been done. At least the government has now promised to make barbiturates illegal, and senior civil servants have been allowed to express their fears in public about how the problem's growing. Chief Inspector of Drugs, Bing Spear.
Well, there's no doubt at all that we're on an upsurge again at the moment. In fact, if you see from this graph, which shows the number of notified addicts, this is when, in the early 60s, we were dealing with a total addict population of 500-600. The latest figures here are 4,000 addicts known to us in the course of a year, and these are probably 2 years out of date.
And you'd accept, would you, that even that alarming-looking increase represents only a very small proportion of the total number of people involved?
Yes, because a lot of people don't come in contact with doctors. For various reasons, doctors don't notify. And, of course, we're only dealing with one group of drugs which are abused. We're only dealing, essentially, with the opiates. We're not touching barbiturates or anything like that. So, if you like, it's a tip of an iceberg. I think you've got to say now that there is drug abuse of one sort or another in most parts of the country. The form it takes will depend very much, I think, upon local circumstances.
The fact that heroin is not as important as often made out is a view shared even by those whose prime concern among drugs is heroin. Chief Investigator of HM Customs and Excise, Peter Cutting.
Well, there's a myth grown up that because of the huge quantities that we've been seizing, far more than in the past, that there's a great heroin problem, growing heroin problem in this country. Frankly, I don't think that is true at all. The majority of the heroin that we seize is destined to go outside this country. We are dealing with huge professional organisations, and their markets, the major markets for heroin, are outside this country at the moment, and we want to keep it that way. I can show you the sort of thing we're up against with the professionals. Here we have a parcel of Iranian heroin, just a little over 1.5 kilos, which came in a double-bottom suitcase, and that on the streets is worth £180,000. Some of the concealments are really quite sophisticated. If we just take these studs off this case, you'll see we have a perfect space there which will hold about 2 kilos of heroin.
But although you're getting substantial hauls, very little of this stuff is staying in Britain.
Well, we know for certain that 70% of what we seized in 1977 was definitely for onward transmission. Our investigation showed that. For last year, 78, the figure was 90%. I doubt whether it'll be very much different at the end of this year.
So heroin is still relatively rare and expensive. Common medicines are a fraction of the cost, and Gina couldn't keep away from them. 3 weeks after she'd promised her mother she'd given up drugs, she was supposed to be starting a job, but we found her back at Piccadilly Circus.
Hello, Gina.
Hi.
What went wrong?
Nothing went wrong.
You're supposed to be at work today, Gina.
Sod it. Don't film me, man, right?
Georgina, what's all this about?
It took another fix before Gina would calm down, but in 15 minutes her mood had changed completely.
Gina, you were going to be at work today. What went wrong?
Well, I just didn't have the courage to go in there. I sat outside the Alfred Marks Bureau, but I just didn't have the courage to go in.
Why not?
I don't know, you know, when I'm off of drugs, I get so bloody well nervous.
What happened about the job last week? I mean, you were only there for, what, 5 hours in a whole week?
Well, look, put it this way. It wasn't a paid job. It bored me stiff. You see what I was doing. All I was doing was just picking up the telephone. It's just bloody well boring.
Is it worth going on with the attempt to give up?
I've give up. I really have, and truly give up. Honest. Okay, I may drink quite a few times.
Why do you go on with this, Gina? Because I know you've been taking drugs.
I've taken them a couple of times. Yeah, you may have a few slip-ups. I may come down here at times for company, yes. But that is all. I do not buy drugs.
I feel I'm always having to catch you out at telling little lies because...
I'm not telling you a lie, Nick.
But she was. The next day, we tracked her down to a friend's flat, and there Gina admitted all.
Just how many did you have yesterday? Because I gathered you'd had quite a few.
Yes.
How many did you have?
I can't remember. Hang on. That was 4. I didn't take the lot, otherwise I'd more likely be dead. But I took quite a few.
Do you know how many?
About 9.
Why?
To help with the withdrawals, because I didn't have no fire yesterday. And it's very, very hard.
Where did you get them from?
Well, from a doctor.
Did you already have them, or did you have to go and get them?
I had to go to get them. That's another reason I had to go through Piccadilly Circus. But they helped me come off, believe it or not. They really helped me with the withdrawals.
Okay, let's see what happens.
Right.
10 weeks later, Gina really did come off barbiturates in hospital. She was lucky. Treatment facilities are often geared to heroin withdrawal, which is actually safer. Dave Turner of the Standing Conference on Drug Abuse and a government advisor on the subject.
Unlike nearly any other substance, withdrawal from barbiturates